Number of things that are going on in the world. We're hoping that later on Steve Rao will be able to come on and share with us what took place in an event that he was hosting, which was an event around AI, and it featured John Chambers of Cisco and all along those lines. And actually, yesterday I was in an event as well because actually there's a thing called the Cityscape Summits, which is a number of folks that are talking about economics and all along those lines, and they are from a variety of cities and a variety of places. Matter of fact, I met somebody from Tacoma, Washington, somebody from upstate New York that was actually involved in the penal system and had actually been convicted, but was now working on a food truck business because he and his business partner are actually welders. So they're actually the ones kind of making the food trucks that we might be seeing traveling around the nation and all along those lines. So it was a very interesting conversation with him. So he looks like he's definitely going in a positive direction. And then, like I said, I met a person from the school system out of Tacoma, Washington, and a number of other folks. And that conference is going on through today and into tomorrow. Believe it ends in early afternoon or something along those lines. So it'll be definitely interesting. Might try to make it back through there later on today. But I was doing a walking tour talking about the history of Durham and particularly as it centers around Black Wall Street and the Black Wall Street here in Durham, North Carolina. So a good friend of mine, Aya Shabu, and her husband Telly, who was actually out of country. I believe she's still in Liberia. Usually do that. So I actually took Telly's narration role because he's out of pocket and all along those lines. But it was quite fun and it was good. We actually had a bigger crowd than we were expecting because I think they were looking for about 30 or 35, and it wound up being a larger group of about 55 or 60 that you're trying to maneuver through downtown Durham and all along those lines so that you can show them some of the spots of both note in terms of history, but also note in terms of the present, because we did show them the DPAC and we did show them American tobacco and some of the other things that are very much a part of Durham's history, or the modern history, I should say, and all along those lines. But as a matter of fact, I think today they might have been having a conversation going on right around now around reparations and how that has played a role in some cities like Asheville, California, and a number of other places. So it's definitely about economic impact and a lot of other things in that space. I believe the organization is called New Growth, and you can go to newgrowth.org if you want to learn more about that particular event and all along those lines. But let me get to you some news items, and then I do have a special guest that I've got in that will definitely have some interesting thoughts. We have some financial wizards here on this network, and we've got a financial guest. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's got to say about a number of things on the financial side as well. But he's also a house musician, so he's got all kinds of things going on, and it'll be quite interesting to see where he's going in that space and all along those lines. It looks like Biden is asserting executive privilege. Now that we're getting ready to get to some of the more national and international news over the her audio files ahead of a House contempt kind of effort and all along those lines. So it looks like he is exerting executive privilege. And of course, we've got Michael Cohen still testifying in the Donald Trump hush money trial and all along those lines. So definitely it looks like Michael Cohen is returning as the final witness in New York City's AG Attorney General Bragg's criminal prosecution of Trump. So we'll see how this all plays out and all along those lines. They are saying that Slovakia Prime Minister Robert Fico is in a very serious condition after having been shot. So definitely there's a lot of violence going on in the world. And apparently the Israel defense minister is attacking Netanyahu over the Gaza future. So that is something else that we are seeing as well. So definitely there's a number of things that are going on in that space and along those lines. As a matter of fact, like I said, Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico is in stable but serious condition. So we'll be following that story, and I'm sure the rest of the news media will be following that as well. And there is some folks in apparently NPR is saying that Israel has no plan for Gaza after Hamas rule, and that is what the Israeli defense chief says. So actually, it's not even what NPR is reporting, but the Israeli defense establishment apparently is saying that as well. So there might be some internal discord going on in that area also. And Zelensky is in Kharkiv as Ukraine claims to partially halt the Russian offensive in that area. So we still got that war going on. And it looks like Zelensky is saying that it's the world's fault as Zelensky is speaking out amid this latest Russian assault. So that is something else that we're seeing as well. So there's a number of things that are going on even in the situation with Gaza. So the U.S. military begins Gaza aid deliveries from that floating pier that is out there as well. And Putin and Xi are meeting, so they've agreed to deepen the partnership as Russia is advancing in Ukraine. So it looks like Putin is looking to China's Xi for geopolitical and an energy lifeline. So definitely they've been having meetings as well. And it looks like, according to state media, the U.S. soldier that was detained in Russia has admitted his guilt in a theft case. But that'll be interesting to see what goes on in that case and if there's kind of a negotiation chip used in that space as well. So like I said, there's a number of things that are going on around the world. And like I said, I'm fortunate enough to have a person here that's in the financial space and all along those lines. And we might get to some other world issues, but when we have guests, I like to get to them so that I can learn more about them and what they're all about and all along those lines. So we do have Jared Dillian with us. So I'm going to bring Jared Dillian in. And Jared, actually, later on, we'll be bringing in Sasha Starr. He's got an investment show and all along those lines. But I know that you are involved in the investment space. You have some great books and all along those lines. And you've also been involved with some major companies like the Lehman Brothers, as well as I think you've done some reporting for Bloomberg and a number of other folks. But if you'll share with our audience, and we do have one of the founders with us as well, and she'll be joining us shortly also, Kim Calhoun, as to some of the things that you've been doing. And I also understand you and Sasha share something else because you have a love of music. You are a house musician, but I think you were also, if I remember correctly, trained in classical music and all along those lines. So just share a little bit with us as to how you came down this financial journey and where you're calling us from and all along those lines, because I'm sure folks will be quite fascinated by your history as always, as also some of the stories that you've got from your own involvement in the financial world.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, actually, I went to the Coast Guard Academy for college and served in the Coast Guard for 9 years, and went to business school and got an MBA at the University of San Francisco. Spent a couple years on the options trading floor in San Francisco and the Pecos Options Exchange. And then I went to Lehman Brothers for 7 years. I was the head of ETF trading. So I had a successful career at Lehman Brothers. At the bankruptcy, I decided to start my own newsletter, which is called the Daily Dirt Nap. I've been doing that for 16 years. Like you said, I've written 4 books. The first one was Street Freak. The most recent one was No Worries: How to Live a Stress-Free Financial Life. That came out in January of this year. The book's doing great. And like you said, I was an opinion columnist for Bloomberg and Forbes, and done a bunch of. I actually had my own radio show for 2 years. So, still active in the financial space. The newsletter is my main job, and that's pretty much it.
Well, I appreciate that and everything. What's some of the things that you think? Because I know one of the things that both Kim Calhoun and Nick, who is the other founder of the network and a pension attorney, talk about is this notion that we don't really teach enough about fiscal literacy. And a lot of people are constantly in credit debt. I know that I've been in some credit debt as well also. But what is one of the mistakes that you find that people make on a regular basis? And what advice would you give to folks to get out of this mirage that many of us are in?
Well, a lot of people don't really take responsibility for their own financial education. And the thing is that financial education is not really taught in schools. It's not taught in high schools. It's starting to be a little bit. But most people graduate even from college and they don't know how the financial system works, and they have no interest. And at some point in their lives, they're going to apply for a car loan or they're going to apply for a mortgage, and they're at a huge information disadvantage. And, it can cost them. It can cost them in the long run. I don't think that financial education necessarily gives people better habits. I think, you can learn about finance and still be bad with money. My book tries to teach people how to be good with money. But yeah, I mean, we are all responsible for our own financial education. There's a lot of married couples where you have one person in the marriage that says, well, my husband is responsible for all the money decisions. And, that can turn out to be a problem. If they get divorced and, the wife or the husband is on their own and if they've never dealt with financial issues before, it can be a big problem. So we're all responsible for our own financial education.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Like I said, Sasha will be joining us shortly, also in the financial space, and definitely has been very excited about things with NVIDIA and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take, because not everybody is going to do the stock market play and all along those lines. So, and I do know that one of his fellow panelists on his show is oftentimes talking about the S&P and how it is best to invest in the U.S. market and all along those lines, but invest in it as a whole is how he says about it. But you used to work for Lehman Brothers, so I just wonder your take on the stock market and whether more of us need to be trying to play that stock market game, or is it something that is only for the elite?
Yeah, if the stock market has been significantly democratized. I mean, even a couple of days ago, you saw the meme stocks rallied again, GameStop and AMC and stuff like that. But I would say in the late 2010s, there was a big movement to get people into low cost index funds, and Vanguard has $6 trillion in assets at this point. And, these are do-it-yourselfers. These are do-it-yourself investors who might have 50 or 100,000 or $200,000. And they pick a few index funds and they buy and hold. And, it usually works out pretty well for them in the long run. So, yeah, there's some good things.
Yep. And just really quickly, and like I said, I'm going to bring in some of the other panelists as well. But before I get to them, I also know that one of the other hobbies that you have, which I found quite interesting because you are very much involved in a multitude of things, is that you are also known as being a DJ and being a DJ in the club circuit and definitely doing some of that house music. So how do you blend the two of those, and what commonality do you find between the finance world and the world of being a house type DJ?
Well, I haven't done a lot of music, I would say, in the last year and a half. I've been very busy building a house and writing books and doing stuff like that. I have a gig planned for September in New York City. I've been DJing for 16 years. I started in 2008. And over my career, I've had a lot of great gigs. I've been able to do things that a lot of DJs have been able to do. I'm 50 years old and I'm still doing it. I love it. And, I sit here in this office and I have a sound system in the ceiling and I play house music during the day. I mean, when we got on, you probably heard it through the microphone. So, I'm constantly listening to music. It is my favorite thing in the world.
Right. Just really quickly before I bring in Kim and Sasha, and I think maybe there might be others that are here with us as well. But what is one of the great errors that you think people make in terms of finances, in terms of like their financial planning? So, what is one of the great errors that you feel that people make on a regular basis?
Well, I think the biggest financial decision that people will make is buying a house. And I think people don't have an appreciation for the risk that comes with buying a house. The process for buying a house is very streamlined. It's very easy. And people, when they buy a house, it becomes an emotional decision, and they usually end up buying too much of a house. So really what people should do is they should try to spend no more than 25% of their income on housing. But people typically break that rule and they spend 35 or 40% of their income on housing. And what happens is that crowds out their ability to save money for retirement. If you have 40% of your income going to housing, then it's very, very hard to save for retirement. So I would say that's the number one mistake people make.
Just along those same lines, I know that I'm glad you brought that up because I know that they say, I forget what it is, but it's some percentage is supposed to go towards your rent, and if it exceeds that, then you're probably heading towards some poverty lines, or definitely some lines of being in some financial crisis. And I know a number of people, even if they are doing the landlord apartment kind of situation, are probably exceeding that amount. I think you said you spent some time in New York, and I know you spent some time in Florida as well. So I know some of those areas that have some very high real estate, and we've even been having higher real estate here in North Carolina and everything. So I just wonder, do you think that people, even when they are looking not so much at the house, but even at their apartment living, that they are spending too much time not reflecting on how much the cost is going to be in terms of their total budget? And I would add to that also their eating out habits and their food habits as well. So is that something that you're finding a lot of people are having a hard time dealing with?
Well, generally, I tell people not to worry about the little stuff. You can go out to eat once or twice a week. You can buy coffee. You can get groceries. It's the little stuff doesn't really matter. Like the whole focus of my book is that it's the big things that matter. It's the house, the car, and the student loans. It's just math. If you get a house that's $100,000 more expensive, you're going to spend 120 grand in interest over the life of the loan, which is like 4 lifetimes of coffee. So, the little stuff going out to eat, as long as you're not going out to eat every single night, but you can go out to eat once a week, and it does not make that big of a difference. And I can tell you from somebody who just built a house and spent a whole bunch of money on building a house, going out to dinner and spending $80 really does not change the shape of the earth.
Yeah. What's your take? Because I know some people have been upset on both sides of the house, I would argue, and everything around the notion of student loan relief and student loan debt being forgiven and everything. But I just wondered, as a person that's in that financial space and having done some of these opinion columns, what is your take on the student loan forgiveness and whether this is a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I mean, basically, if we forgive student loans, one of two things is going to happen. This is going to be taken on balance sheet by the government, and you're either going to have to pay more in taxes or we're going to have to go into debt more. And if we go into debt more, then interest rates go up. So we're all going to end up paying. I mean, morally, I disagree with it. I don't really want to be responsible for somebody else's education. But beyond that, the financial implications are, people who are trapped in student loans, really, people get into a position where they're spending $800 a month, $1,200 a month on student loans. They have 6 figures in debt. Really, the only way out is to make more money. What people usually do is they try to cut expenses. They try to, not to go out to the movies and not go out to eat and save money. The only if you're trapped by debt, the only way out is to focus on the revenue side and make more money. So get a second job, work longer hours, do things like that.
What's your take, Jared? Because you heard me mention it earlier that I was at an event, and like I said, they're speaking earlier, and I'm going to bring up something that Sasha has brought up as well, and everything when it comes to the students wanting to divest and everything. But I just wanted your take on government's role in terms of this financial picture, because like I said, my friend Sandy Darity is a leader. He's actually a relative in the reparations movement and all along those lines. But I know that sometimes they want the government to kind of like get the money and then redistribute the money. I think that's what was happening in Asheville. And then there you've got the students that are wanting to have companies divest because they feel that it is a moral issue where they are concerned with, like Israel. And there have been other cases, even like with apartheid and everything. But I just wanted your take on the government's role in these financial matters, whether it's city, state, or federal government, and whether these are issues that people need to be dealing with, or is this something out of the common man's jurisdiction?
Well, I can't really speak to the reparations, but I can tell you, in terms of divesting
Mhm.
from Israel or another country or, ESG or stuff like that, if you have an endowment or a pension fund that has a broad range of investments, they're typically investing in alternative investments, private equity and venture capital and hedge funds and stuff like that. they may be investing someplace indirectly, which people might find objectionable. It's very hard to. I mean, a lot of these investments are illiquid and tied up for 10 years, and you can't simply redeem your shares in the fund. Because of political pressure. I mean, you have no ability to do that. You're stuck in the fund for 10 years. So as a practical matter, it just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm gonna bring in Kim Calhoun, who's one of the founders of the network, and she's definitely an engineer by trade and has been involved in a lot of other things, including having women business owners being very active and all along those lines. But Kim, I didn't know if you had any questions for Jared, because he's definitely in that financial space. Has worked for Lehman and has definitely done some writing and work with Bloomberg and Forbes and a number of other folks, as he was just saying, and everything.
Well, no, I mean, he sounds like he's very, very well knowledgeable in that space. And, I just think that sharing that knowledge with other people is our duty, right? That as we learn something, we should do it, learn it, do it, share it. I mean, that's how we grow a community of intelligent people who can unite together and work together and build a better place, not just for our community, but for our world. So, keep sharing the wealth of knowledge, and, just, you know, I've learned a lot today, learned about who you are and how things work.
Yeah, definitely on all along those lines. Just really quickly, because could you share some of the names of the? Because one of the things I was curious about is the name of your novel, or one of your novels, is "All the Evil of This World," and some people talk about money being the root of all evil. So I'm thinking that's where you were going with that title and everything. So I was just wondering your take on this and how you came around the title and that title of also your publication, The Daily Dirt Nap, and everything. Because some people would say that it's very much boring when they think about finances, even though it's very important for us. I'm guessing that's where you were going with both of those titles, but I'm just guessing. So I'd rather hear it from the person that came up with these titles. So tell
well,
me a
you,
little bit
you
about these titles.
definitely have to read the book. I mean, it's a great novel, but the title is meant to be ironic, actually. So there's I think if you read it, and I think if you read it and you thought about the title, you would say actually it's ironic and means sort of the opposite of what it's supposed to. So
Gotcha. What advice would you give to folks that are wearing or thinking about retirement? Like I said, I'm 62, and the retirement. Well, I don't know that I'll ever retire because my dad's in his 80s and he's still working and all along those lines. But that's his choice and all in that kind of space. But what advice would you give to folks that are thinking about retirement?
Well, I mean, the main piece of advice I would give is to wait to take Social Security as long as possible. So let me give you some statistics. Full retirement is at age 66. You can get Social Security at age 62, and you can max out your benefits at age 70. 50% of people take Social Security at age 62. 1% of people take it at age 70. And if you take it at age 70, you have twice the benefits than if you take it at age 62. So what I usually find is that people are very pessimistic about how long they are going to live. They say, well, I might as well take it when I'm 62 because I'm just not going to live that long. But life expectancy is much higher. Life expectancy is, well above 80 in this country. And usually what happens is that people take Social Security too early. They have these teeny tiny benefits, and they're living in something close to poverty for the last 20 years of their lives. So I always tell people to wait as long as possible to take Social Security.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm going to be a myth buster here just a little bit. Just do the math before you make a decision. For some people, it becomes a benefit earlier. And if you stretch it out among the years, your benefit actually might come in just a few $1,000s difference and not that and you need it now. So, definitely sit down with an advisor, with Social Security. I thought the same thing. My husband and I talked about this for a long time. That was our plan and goal before he died. But when I sat down with Social Security at first, I thought they were scamming me. They were like, no, you need to sit down and here's the math. And, the longer you take it, and a lot of people don't know this, but Social Security does pay a raise. Every year you get an increase in your Social Security as you're taking it. So you're not stuck with, just a lower amount. And it does increase a little bit of interest, a guaranteed interest, over those courses of the years. But just do the math before you make that decision. It might be to your benefit to wait, and it might not.
Yeah, just really quickly and everything, Jared, that's one of the other things that I was reading some of your commentaries and some of your columns on your website and everything, and a couple of them were very interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around them. And I kind of alluded to one of them because one of them, you start off with the notion that money is not the root of all evil, and the love of money is not evil, and that money can be good, and it's because of the virtues that it takes to make money. And that was one that you wrote about 2 weeks ago. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago today, and everything. So just wondering your take on what you meant by that, and also the one that you wrote the week before, which might have been tied into it, which was about financial nihilism, and you talk about that attaining wealth is harder these days, but in some ways it is easier. So I'd love to hear about your thoughts around both of those ideas.
Well, the piece about the money being the root of all evil. So first of all, that was a segment I did on the radio about 4 or 5 years ago. And one of my people turned that into an essay, which we sent out as a newsletter. So my memory of this is a little hazy because it's been 4 or 5 years. No, I mean, I don't believe that money is evil at all. I believe it's good because of, like you said, because of the virtues it takes to make it. And those virtues are hard work and thrift and intelligence and stuff like that. So, this is the way I live my life. I'm a capitalist, and I run a business, and I try to make as much money as possible. And, I like to give it away. I'm a bit of a philanthropist. I like to donate money. That's one thing people don't really think about is, the good things that they can do with money. That is one altruistic that motivation for making more money is the good things that you can do with it.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Just really quickly, because there are some friends of mine that are in the entrepreneurial space. As a matter of fact, I'm going to bring one of them on right now, that'd be in Jatopia and everything along those lines. But you also had in one of your papers this notion that attaining wealth is actually harder these days than it used to be, and all along those lines. So I just wanted your take on what you meant by that, because I know a number of people that are constantly trying to go into the entrepreneurial field, sometimes in difficult entrepreneurial fields like restaurant owners and things along those lines. But what did you mean when you were writing that attaining wealth is harder, say, in the 21st century than it might have been in other centuries?
Well, I mean, first of all, like one main way that people made money in the past was through real estate. So you have, this is Myrtle Beach. I live in Pawleys Island. It's close to Myrtle Beach. And you have a lot of people moving down from New York. These were blue collar people. They bought a house in 1979 for $70,000, and they sold it a couple years ago for $900,000. And they move here, and they had no debt on the house. They have almost $1 million in cash, and they buy a place for $300,000, and they live off the rest. And these are people who never invested in the stock market. Now real estate prices are a lot higher. I actually bought my first house when I was 25 years old. I had just turned 25, and I bought a condo in California. It was a townhouse for $175,000. And I sold it 2.5 years later for $300,000. And stuff like that is just very hard to do nowadays. I mean, there's not a lot of cheap real estate, and that's a big reason why it's harder for people to get ahead. Scott Galloway talked about this on MSNBC recently. He's promoting his new book, The Algebra of Wealth, and he had a clip that went sort of viral that talked about how, a lot of young people are really stuck nowadays because because of the cost of living, because of real estate, because the stock market is so high, and a lot of assets are overvalued.
Speaking of that and everything, because I know that one of the other things that Kim went doing, we may talk about that about as well. But you have an episode that I guess is airing later today and everything that talks about crypto, Google, and the AI Valley of Despair. That's what you call it and everything. So you had mentioned that anytime a new technology is developed, of course, there's that hype phase, and we know about the bubble burst that took place in a number of different businesses and everything. So you I guess are going to point out or are pointing out that when money pours into a space that leads to overinvestment and malinvestment, then you enter that valley of despair. So I just wanted your talk around this notion, because a lot of people are getting very excited about AI, augmented intelligence, and a number of other things. But it seems as a finance person that you are saying that you might need to be doing some of these investments with caution.
Yeah, I mean, anytime there's a new technology, there's a gold rush of investment. This happened with the dot-com bubble in the late 90s. From 1996 to 2000, the NASDAQ went up 500% or more. And what happened was there was, like you said, there was overinvestment and the market crashed. And you had a period of time that lasted about 10 years after that where, the stocks themselves were underperformers, but that's when all the work was really being done on the internet in the space. It's funny, like in 1998, there was no Facebook, there was no Google, there was no Twitter, there was none of this stuff. And the full potential of the internet, it really took 20 years for it to be realized. So something similar is going to happen to AI. There's going to be an initial gold rush of investment, and then you enter the valley of despair and things get hard. But it's during that time period that the real technological progress is made. We don't really know how AI is going to be used 20 years from now. I've heard of medical applications, I've heard of industrial applications, but we don't really know how it's going to be used. And right now, all it really is a chat bot. And people can see the promise of this technology, but it's going to take a long time for this to come to fruition.
Jacoby, you got any thoughts? Because you're in the gaming space, and definitely there's a lot of investments that you've been doing, and you're definitely looking in the gaming world as well as, and I know you oftentimes talk about esports and how much esports makes even more than another sport you're involved with, with baseball and the other primary sports all combined and everything. But any thoughts about what Jared has been saying, even around AI?
Well, yeah, gaming is huge. Gaming, honestly, gaming. The gaming world sees the AI in a different light, and sees the games that are produced that were dependent upon, that were in the imaginary space of what AI could be. And yeah, he's spot on about we don't truly know what it's going to be. I do disagree that it's a little bit more than just a chatbot, because the amount of coding and images and movies and everything else, the videos that people are starting to create, and the things that people are utilizing for in the medical industry, to even now in the gaming space. An interesting thing is that Electronic Arts has now announced that they're going to start using AI in some of the coding for their gaming. Is going to start using AI in gaming. However, that announcement really is the same announcement that Elon Musk made about, hey, we're going to make Neuralink, because Neuralink isn't the only thing in that space. Just as EA utilizing AI in the gaming world, it's been there for a while. Matter of fact, Rick and Morty, the producers of that, they created a game. That video game actually utilizes AI to create some of the artwork in there. But yeah, there's just my curiosity, especially in the financial world. What do you see as the future in the financial world with, the other entities entering in, from crypto still being new, Bitcoin still there, and where are we going? Are we going to a unified coin at some point? What do you see in that financial world? Because, like I said, with BRICS and their their now money and all the different countries. So yeah, how is this coming together? Are we going to get a unified coin? What do you see?
Jared?
Well, I mean, I don't. A lot of people have been predicting the end of the dollar, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Like you mentioned, the BRICS trying to create a reserve currency, and that is, if that happens, it's going to play out over a period of decades. And typically, the dollar has been the reserve currency for the last 200 years. Before that, it was the British pound, and before that, it was Spain. And the country with the world's reserve currency is usually the country with the world's strongest navy, right? So when a country loses a naval war, that's usually when they lose reserve currency status. Now, the interesting thing is that our fleet of Navy ships has been declining steadily for the last 20, 30 years. I remember when I was in the Coast Guard, we had 600 Navy ships. Now we have about 275. And China actually has much more than us. So if you're looking for, shifts in, what currency is going to be dominant, like that's the type of stuff that you look at, because the Navy is how a country projects power over the world. So.
Hey, Jared, along those same lines, one of the other shows we have is Economic Mondays with the Honorable David Walker. And I know he's written a book about America still a superpower and all along those lines. And one of his themes is that maybe we are losing some of our power. And you kind of alluded to that as well. So where do you see the dollar and where do you see the stock market, say, in 5 to 10 years? And do you have a fear that this is a declining empire?
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of hard to see out past the next election. I mean, that's really going to determine a lot of things. I mean, look, like the stock market is overvalued by any objective measure. The stocks are very expensive, and usually when stocks get to this valuation, the forward returns go down for a decade. So I don't necessarily think that the stock market is going to decline. But we've become accustomed to 9 or 10% average returns over the last 20 or 30 years, and we may not get those returns going forward. It may be much less than that. So,
just really quickly along those same lines, and I do see Rick's got a question for you as well. There's this notion of America, and not just America, but various segments of America being a consumer society. So, what is your take on that? Because some people would say that we have become overly a consumer society and maybe become too consumerized and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take on this notion of us being a consumer society.
I don't know if I really have anything smart to say about that. I can tell you that, I just moved into my new house, and one of the first things we did was we went to Costco, and I spent $1,300 on stuff for the house. And the funny thing about Costco is they only take Visa cards, and I don't have a Visa card, so I had to pay cash. So the whole thing was pretty comical. But yeah, I mean, consumer spending has been strong ever since the pandemic, ever since the stimulus payments. And there's some economic data that shows that, there were savings associated with the stimulus that have persisted for a long period of time. But those savings are being depleted. And what's interesting is that we had, retail sales come out yesterday, which were quite a bit weaker than expected. So, we could be coming to the end of this consumer-driven economy, at least in the short term.
Interesting. Rick, you had a question?
Well, so you will, if we are coming to the end of, people going crazy buying stuff, we might get a bump in the stock markets if the Fed decides to lower interest rates sometime this summer or in September. So just for the short term, you might get a bump because when interest rates go down, that drives people into the stock market.
Yeah, it's really kind of a coin toss as to whether, look, like if they lower interest rates in September, it'll be 25 basis points. It won't be a lot. And inflation is actually reaccelerating. So CPI came in at 3.4% yesterday. But what's interesting is that through the first 4 months of this year, it's actually accelerated. We've had 4.5% inflation. So it is picking up again. The Fed may be in a position where they cut rates once in September, but they actually have to raise them again in 2025. And I think that's actually very likely.
So
Hey, Jared, just
earlier-
really quickly, I'm sorry, just really quickly along those same lines, I've heard some people that have speculated, I think even Kim has speculated, that depending on what the Federal Reserve does and all along those lines, that it could influence the elections, because we also know that right around the time of the elections, which is around November, that's usually around the time that we get that holiday bump with gas prices and all along those lines. So I just wondered your take on how much the economy and maybe even some of the Fed's decisions could influence what you alluded to earlier, which is the election coming up between Trump and Biden. So how much could this be a contributing factor?
Well, you know, I have known some people at the Fed, and the Fed takes politics into account probably more than you would like to know. You know, look, like there's two ways to look at this. I mean, the Fed started talking about rate cuts back in December. There was a speech by Fed Governor Christopher Waller where he talked about the idea that interest rates were very restrictive, monetary policy was very restrictive, and we needed to cut rates. But at the same time, the Fed typically does not change rates much or at all in an election year. And the fact that they're considering a rate cut right before the election, I don't know. Like I don't really believe in coincidences. I can tell you that the Fed really dislikes Trump. Powell dislikes Trump because of what Trump did in the first term. He basically did not respect Fed independence and was constantly pressuring Powell to lower interest rates to zero or negative. So I don't think the Fed wants Trump to be president. Now, like whether a 25 basis point rate cut in September would do anything, I'm not sure, but I can tell you those are the dynamics.
Rick, you had another question, and
Well, Trump is bad at business, and he's gone bankrupt 5 or 6 times. Between 1985 and 2015, he lost more money than any other American. So that's not a guy you want running America.
Well, really, the issue is one of Fed independence. I mean, the central bank has to be free to make monetary policy decisions irrespective of politics. And that's really the problem with Trump, is that Trump hasn't respected Fed independence. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about 2 weeks ago that talked about how Trump's economic team is drafting plans to weaken Fed independence and actually potentially allow Trump to have a role in setting interest rates himself, which would be a disaster.
Wow. Kim, you got any thoughts? I know we've got Steve who did a report on AI, so I want to bring him in as well. But I've definitely learned a lot from you, Jared, and hopefully you can make some other return trips as well. But I mean, Steve is a politician, and I hope that he has some thoughts and questions for you as well. And we've also got Kim, but they were at an AI conference with John Chambers recently.
I just want to say thank you for your input, and I want to give the table to Steve because he can fill you in a lot better than I can. But it was an amazing conference. I thank Steve for everything that he does because he just doesn't talk it, he walks it. Hey, how's DC, Steve?
Good. Yeah, this isn't a Zoom background. Well, Rick, it's great. I mean, it's great to have the economist on. A real quick wrap, and I'll try to open up next time I'm here. I've got to go to a meeting, but the bottom line, and it doesn't affect the economy. So a couple of takeaways. One thing that I really gathered from John Chambers, and let's keep in mind that this is a guy that took a company from 70 million to 47 billion in 21 years, acquired 180 companies, made 10,000 millionaires. He's very good at predicting things. One of the things that he emphasized is there is going to be a lot of job loss because of AI. But the opportunity is going to be, it's going to be easier to take products to market. So normally in 5-6 years, it would take a company to get their sales going up. Right now, he thinks it could take 2 or 3 months. You don't even have to code anymore. What he predicts, which I find interesting, is that by the year 2030, we could have about a dozen $1 trillion companies. Right now, we have maybe 5 or 6. and they're going to be big giants, that are going to be hiring a lot of people. There's going to be crashes, but I think that's important. It's moving very fast. We're going to have to educate and train our workforce faster than we've ever thought. The other takeaway is India's kicking our ass, pardon my French, but we're not dreaming anymore in the U.S., and Narendra Modi is killing it with infrastructure, with 1.2 billion people now connected on the internet, 81 startups valued at $1 billion. India is certainly on the way to be the #1 economy in the world. And based on what Chambers said yesterday, I think it's going to happen a lot sooner than people are thinking. I think that India will be #1 maybe in the next 5 years, maybe a little longer, but they're on their way. And so that's really my takeaways. I mean, Kimberly, if you have any insight, but I think it was really interesting to see he was an optimist. He was positive. I think, though, the economy, in terms of what the economist today has been saying, what I'm hearing on the ground is that because inflation isn't coming down, it is coming down, but prices aren't coming down. This could bode trouble for President Biden in the fall. He's dropped down in 5 swing states, including North Carolina, and could win the presidency again. Joe Biden has asked for a debate in June, which I think is a good strategy. I'm going to go meet some people in Congress this afternoon. Lots of stuff going on here, but but anyway, that's my feedback. Hope anyone wants to talk to me or ask me. I got 5 more minutes, so thank you.
No problem, Manel. This is actually for both you and Jared and everything, because there's been a lot of talk about the need, because of the cost of the world and everything, to have the money and the minimum wage at like 25. So I just wanted to, if John Chambers mentioned anything about that, and also your own thoughts, Jared, because there has been definitely a push, because some people say that you really can't make it unless you are making it at $25 an hour. And we know that a lot of restaurant jobs are not that, and a lot of other jobs are not that as well. So what is our take? Because I don't think we've raised the minimum wage in probably about a decade or two and everything, but which is either of your thoughts? But I'll start with Jared, but Steve, you want to jump in as well.
Go ahead, Steve.
No. All I would say is productivity gains can be good in terms of speed to market and innovation and accelerating innovation. So I think that's an opportunity to create an AI ecosystem that will be similar to what we saw during the cloud revolution. I think, before I go back to and your name, I'm sorry, economist, I forgot your name. Your name?
Jared Dillian.
Yeah, sorry, I can't see. It's very bright out here. I think, as what Mr. Dillian would probably agree with is that initially, in the short term, productivity is going to eliminate a lot of jobs, and that's going to hurt America. But what I gather from Chambers is the analogy between the cloud revolution. So during the cloud, order entry jobs went online, but it became very imperative for companies to have an internet strategy, a cloud strategy. Before we knew it, we saw big giants like Amazon and Google, and then GDP went up, and we had a really good performance in our economy. I think what I'm hearing from Chambers is we're going to see the same thing. We're going to see a lot of really big AI companies make it. We're going to see a lot fail, but there's going to be a few big ones that are going to come. And it's going to be across all industries. So it's almost going to be a separate economy. And so that's my take, is I think, based on what Chambers, and I'm going to bet my money on John Chambers. I mean, someone that acquired 180 companies and captured so much market share for this 20-year reign as CEO, about two-thirds of his focus as an investor and a CEO was in growth, about 1/3 in profitability, and consistent performance for the shareholders of Cisco all across the world. So I know venture capitalists have different opinions in North Carolina, but I'm going to go with Chambers. He honestly has never really been wrong, except doing so. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, what's your take, Jared, just on the whole notion of the rise and possibly needing to have a rise in the minimum wage? Like I said, I know that there's some people, including here in North Carolina, that have been pushing for, first they started for 15, now they're pushing for more like 25, because they say that that's really what you need to survive is $25 an hour if you do the math and everything. But what is your take on that?
Well, I would say with the federal minimum wage at $7.25 an hour, we don't really have a minimum wage. Like the percentage of workers that are actually making $7.25 an hour is less than 2%. And typically those people are high school students. So, we don't have a de jure minimum wage anymore. Hey
Hey
which
guys,
actually I think is a good thing.
I've got to run
Um,
to another meeting, but I'll come back later. Thank you so
All right,
much.
sounds good. Go
That was
ahead,
great.
Jared.
And I agree. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Jones. Thank you.
Sorry about that, but yeah, he had to run. But go
Sorry
ahead
about
and complete your thought, Jared.
yeah, there's look, if you're a business and you have $30, you can pay 3 employees $10 an hour, or 2 employees $15 an hour, and one is unemployed. I'm not a really, look, like, I'm not a big fan of the minimum wage. I think the last time the minimum wage was raised was actually 2008 on a federal level. What you're seeing in California, where it's being raised to $20 an hour, especially at fast food establishments, is that you're seeing a rise in automation. So it's actually eliminating jobs. And, the people at the minimum wage level are typically people who are earlier in their careers. They're training for jobs later in life. They're not expected to make that minimum wage for an entire career. So basically, if you have a minimum wage of $20 or $25 an hour, then young people in high school or in college can't get those jobs because they simply aren't qualified for them. I have an employee at my newsletter. I pay him $16 an hour. He's a senior in college. And yeah, so.
Hey, just really quick along those lines, I know one of the things we've been talking about on this network and just in general is this divisive nature in the society and around the world. But I am of the opinion that some of it is maybe race-based and other things, but I also think it is a significant amount, and that's kind of what they were alluding to at the conferences going on here in North Carolina and everything, particularly Durham, that it might be class-based. So I'm just wondering your take, is there a greater class divide than we've ever seen? And what will be the impact on our overall economy and our overall society? Because I personally think that there might be a great class divide, but I just wondering your take.
I think the U.S. is a very classist society. I really think we do. I think wealthy people are very prejudiced against people of lesser means. I think that absolutely exists. The solution to that, I'm not really sure. But I think, but you asked my opinion on that, and
Right.
That's a fact. So,
yeah. Sasha, any thoughts? Because I know you've been involved in investment. I didn't see your hands raised as well, but you've been listening. Any questions? Because you've definitely been involved in the financial space as one that is invested in NVIDIA and some other things. And like I said, I mentioned you and Milan show, and I do then know that you have one type of investment and Milan has another. So any questions for Jared? Oh, hold on a second. I think you might be on mute, and that might be my fault. So hold on one second. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mark, I'm listening to this show, and with all due respect, I'm not satisfied with the show at all, because it does not help people how to navigate financial matters, how to make some money out of it. And unless the show is highly entertaining with absolutely incredible story, unique stories of some kind, then I really don't see the purpose of this show at all, because this financial education, this is nonsense. People who don't need financial education should not get one, and people who wants to get financial education, everything is available on take YouTube or just any other source, and you will feel and find out everything what you need. So give me the one.
Like I said, I like to bring different perspectives, and I like to bring them out. But to Tofik?
Sasha, let me help you out with that. I mean, yes, for this might not be everybody's cup of tea, but this has been a great discussion. But let me help you out with that in terms of trying to find funds, because honestly, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm in the middle of fundraising. So, Jared, here's a question for you, and this might be what Sasha's looking for. I'm in the middle of trying to fundraise for an educational workforce development project that I'm working on. What places or what areas or what where would be the best for me what areas would be best for me to reach out to? Would it be venture capitalists as donors? Would it be the area of dealing with just going sponsorship wide? What would you suggest the best way for me to raise, we'll say $5 million?
Yeah, I mean there are VCs that specialize in pre-seed or seed funding, which is really what you're looking for. I'm not in that world. I'm not in the venture capital world, so I don't really know specifics or who can do it. But yeah, I mean that's totally possible.
And,
So I have a question for everybody here, because everybody is an expert on AI in a different way. You mentioned earlier the Valley of Despair. So does everybody here think that there will be a better price point to get into AI in the next few years?
Jared, any thoughts? I would think that it's like the other items that we've had, that at some point there will be a reduction in price, because I know that even with some of the things that were existing, and if you looked at some of the augmented reality spaces, they used to be extremely expensive, and now I know that they have dropped in price, and I would imagine the same thing will happen in AI. Do you think that I am correct in that, Jared?
I think there will be a better price point to get into AI at some point in the future, for sure. Yeah.
I think as a common person jumping in, it would be best to jump in now, because you have the capitalist environment that we live in is going to start charging, or going to start nickel and diming you for particular things, as they're doing right now as people get in the chat. For example, there are 2 different levels of Chat GPT that you can join in. You can be in the pro and you can pay, or you can be in the free version. And the free version right now has a good amount of stuff that you can utilize. But as images start to come out more and more, and people are utilizing that for the common person, that's becoming more expensive. I mean, there's places where you can get free stuff now, like Leonardo AI is one that you can type in and generate some AI stuff. Everybody uses, I forget the name of it right now, and I'm on that Discord server as we speak. But there are different price points that you jump in right now, but there's a lot of free stuff because people are just trying to get their name out there.
No doubt.
So it might become more expensive for the common person, but less expensive for the business person.
Hey, Mark, I got to jump off. I got to.
I know we're going to wrap up the whole show anyway, but one of the things I always get all my guests to do and everything is, if you would tell folks how you can be reached and how you can be found, and a little bit about your various shows and your own podcast and everything, because you do have some very interesting comments. I was going to ask you about windfalls, because I know a lot of times people are very much interested in windfalls, and sometimes they get them whether it's the lottery or something else, because I did see that comment that you had as well, but we didn't get to that. But if you want to answer that as you're walking out the door, but the more important thing is to let folks know how you can be reached and contacted.
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter at Daily Dirtnap. My personal finance website business is jareddillionmoney.com. The book is No Worries: How to Live a Stress-Free Financial Life, and you can find that on Amazon or any place else.
Well, I appreciate that. And I know a lot of people are trying to do that, figure out how to live that stress-free kind of financial life. And you gave some advice in that space. Some people may have appreciated it, others maybe not, but I do appreciate it, and hope that you'll make a return trip, because we do have various shows that deal with finance. And of course, this show deals with a lot of various issues and not just one issue or another. So we've got some other guests that'll be coming on as well later on in the week, including some that'll be dealing with the political landscape. Now, I did find it quite interesting what you said about the feds and everything, because I hadn't even thought about that in the past, and what their thoughts might be around the political landscape. So I do appreciate you being on, Jared.
Thank you. See you guys later.
Yeah.
By the way, I disagree with everything what he said about the Fed, that they hate the Trump, and therefore if that would be the case, that they would indeed hate Trump, they would start lowering the interest rates a month, 2 months ago, even now, and not quarter of a point, but half point, maybe even whole point, because their high interest rates, this is causing inflation more than anything else. So this way, I don't believe that they hate Trump. I think they're helping Trump big way, because everybody is waiting that interest rates will be taken lower, so the economy will flourish and stock market will go going higher. And that's not happening. So what kind of a bullshit to say that Fed hates Trump? Explain.
Well, he basically told you why he thinks that, because he talked directly to them and everything. Because he even said he's got friends that are a part of the Fed. If you'd been listening,
I don't buy
along those lines. So he said that he's got friends that are there. You don't have to agree with him, but he talks to them. Have you talked to the guys with the Fed?
Actions weight much more than words. You see the actions of the Fed. And that's
I have a different disagreement with Jared. Early on, he said that he didn't like paying off student loans. For the past 60 years, the government has spent between 4 and 6% of GDP on education, which is about as much as we spend on defense. And both of those things lead to an educated population and technological superiority. And that's America's sweet spot, is technology. And when we have to compete again with India and China, there's probably better ways to pay for education than charging, $500,000 to get a college degree at some places now. But we need to be educated.
I'd like to ask a question. This bothers me for a long time, because there is no such situation in Canada, but in US there is. Let's see, if you got a student loan and you owe a couple $100,000, right? And let's see, you don't have a meaningful job, okay? You're making by or maybe even if unemployed, and you cannot declare bankruptcy to wipe out this obligation because it's not subject to bankruptcy. So then I don't understand what's happening. If you don't have any assets in your name, like real estate or stocks or bonds or anything else, okay, and you don't have a job, what is the meaning, what is the ability of government or agencies, whatever they are, to extract from you any money at all?
They can't. They just your bill keeps growing and growing every year.
But that's fine. But you don't have any intention to pay it. Either you will move to another country sooner or later, or let's say you will get married and your wife or your girlfriend.
Okay, so what you mentioned somebody who doesn't have a good job. You're talking about somebody who's got a degree in, say, English literature. But half the people in college right now are studying for STEM professions, and a lot of those people are going to get really good jobs.
No, those who will have good jobs, okay, they will repay the loans. But I'm talking about the
Sasha, even
good jobs.
Even a lot of those that go into that STEM program are going to be locked into a student loan. This is the problem with student loans and the interest that they throw on top of it and the predatory lending. This is something that we talked about earlier. Yeah, there's no real way to pull that money, and we keep going more and more in debt due to that. I mean, it's a huge expense. So this is why there has to be, instead of allowing the banks to continually perpetuate poverty, which is what is happening with those student loans. And that's why, for example, how you even pointed out, you can no longer write off that in a bankruptcy. That used to be something that was a fallback for a last resort for some of these students. But now, because the Republican Party and the GOP decided, hey, we don't want them to do that. Is more money if they're trapped in debt and don't move throughout the whole low income to the middle class to even the higher income. It's cheaper for them it makes more money for us if we can keep them in the lower class and keep them all pinned down. So they can't get out of that loan. They're always going to be trapped with that loan.
And the Republicans aren't really fans of education, and they don't mind that people who try to get educated end up in trouble. And it's not bad to provide people with student loans. It's bad when the companies doing it are predatory and incompetent. There's been a bunch of stories. 60 Minutes did a big story on how there are these programs made by the government to forgive some. If you work in public service for 20 years, your loans are supposed to be forgiven, and only 6 people in the whole of America got their loans forgiven this way because the loan companies are crappy at keeping track and administering. So, yeah, we need to fix the student loan programs.
We got to fix that, and we're going to wind down on this particular show. And just to let folks know, yes, sometimes I book various guests, and sometimes the guests, to your point, Sasha, I agree with. Sometimes I don't agree with them. So, like I said, some of the things he said I might have taken heed with and thought that they were interesting points of view, and some of them I may have agreed with, and some I may have disagreed with. But part of the things that I think that we do here at Pod TV, at least what I try to do, is bring different points of view and to let the people be heard, and what the audience decide is what they agree with or disagree with, and all along those lines. So that is my own personal journalistic philosophy. As a person that's got a journalism degree, that is my background, and that is what my philosophy is.
Mark, you are one who knows when it comes to financial matters and markets, there is one authority only. It's me, Sasha Star. You know that.
Fair enough. He is the only authority, so that's fair enough. So on that note, and we do have the show that is there on Wednesday and all along those lines with you and Milan. And you do notice that I gave y'all respect and mentioned y'all at least 2 or 3 times during the show and all in that space. So yes, you are a financial wizard and all along those lines. So right now we're here to
see you at noon, Mark.
All right.
Okay, see you at noon.
Yeah.